Hello and welcome to Bloke on the Range, and today we're going to have a bit more nerdery about the Sterling. Not so much about the gun itself today, but rather the magazines. And because they are a bit of a departure, little rollies here. And what we have is a Sterling made commercial magazine, and we have one of the knockoff British government made ones as well. Fundamentally, as we looked at in the past, there's all sorts of interesting things in the Sterling design going on, and last time we talked about the bearing surfaces on the bolt, which are sand cuts and sweep cack around, but there's a whole load of adaptations in the magazine to reduce friction as far as possible and to have the maximum possible reliability. So what I thought we would do, first of all, is we're going to put that aside and we're going to go back to where we came from. This is a Sten magazine. In fact, I have two Sten magazines here. They're both in the white, different constructions. And the Sten system is basically an angry tube adaptation of a German MP28 via the Lanchester. The Sterling is sometimes incorrectly thought of as a development of the Sten, but it's not. It's a parallel development from the Lanchester as well. One day we will do a British machine carbine family trees kind of thing going on there. And in this time period, it was common that the magazines used in practically everything were knockoff double stacked single feed magazines based on the original MP18 straight magazine conversion carried over into the MP28. And then the MP40 are very, very similar. They're a bit shorter in this dimension, but they're all very much based on the same thing. And just as a little reminder, they are a bit of a pain. You kind of need a tool to get more than a trivial number of rounds into them. And what I'll do is just show you just a couple of these, how much of a pain in the backside that is. And the magazines are the weak part in almost any system, and these are fussy not only on the angle of presentation of the rounds to the barrel, but also with what's going on inside. So let us take this apart and we'll see where our start point is. So quick little tangent on Sten magazine construction. Basically what they did was they spec'd the critical dimensions, like the feed presentation angle, how it interacts with the mag housing, the internal dimensions for the column of rounds and so on, and then left it up to the individual manufacturers to do it as they saw fit. And this one here is interesting because it is a single piece seamless drawn tube that has been formed, and this one interestingly has a little lug that they've pushed out on the front there to get that dimension correct. And then this one here is a two-part construction with a sort of gutter backstrap spot welded on. This one doesn't need the little lug on the front there. And there's a whole variety of these, and I suspect I might have one of each of them, but I have to go through my Sten mag collection, but that's a story for another time. So where do we start from? Okay, so we have the base plate comes off, and then what we have inside is a rectangular section spring and a ruddy grate follower like that, and then the internal surfaces in there, it's kind of featureless. So the way the follower works is it slides and is guided by the front and the back of the magazine. It fits in like that. That's for reinforcing and to interact with the spring. MP40 is the same, and then that spring is compressed. Now, when you put a full load of 32 rounds in here, the spring is mightily compressed, and because it is square section, it has the tendency to kink. So as it's compressed, it bears sort of semi-randomly left and right, mostly because that's front and back, and that adds up to friction, and in an extreme case it can become coil bound. These coils get a bit too close to each other, they can hook one over the other, and there's an awful lot of friction going on in there with a stack of cartridges. And one improvement on the MP40 magazine is that there are some ridges on the inside, very much like on the Sterling magazine, but not quite, and we'll get onto that in a minute. Now, you may have noticed that the Sterling magazine is curved, whereas the Sten magazine, MP40 magazine, most of the others are straight. Now, part of the reason for this is that 9mm Parabellum is referred to as a straight wall cartridge, but it is in fact slightly tapered. But the taper is such that it will work in a straight mag or it will work in a curved magazine. But the first way you can reduce friction is by curving the magazine to follow the taper of the cartridge, except that then makes your problems with your zigzaggy spring even worse. So the first thing you notice with the Sterling mag is that it is a true double stack, which means that no more mag loaders needed. They just clip in like that. Improves the capacity in the same sort of overall length. And then we've got some rollers as the followers, which roll on rails formed by pressing these grooves in. What's quite interesting with these with this magazine construction is that it is all individual plates that are then spot welded together with these flange things. And you'll notice on the back, magazine Sterling 9mm 34 rounds, patent numbers 615471 and 692768. We will get back onto that in a minute. So if we pop this off, the first thing we notice is we have a round section true helical spring that is constrained by the rails. This cannot flop around, it cannot become kinked, coil bound, it is restrained. And that is this patent, GB692768, and there's a beautiful drawing here explaining the hows and whys of what it's doing. It is a very simple little patent. So what they claim is a cartridge magazine of the kind described for an automatic firearm, characterized by the employment of a helical compression spring maintained in arcuate form lengthwise to correspond with the contours of the magazine by guide elements disposed along the side walls of the magazine. They also mention a cartridge magazine of the kind described for an automatic firearm, formed or provided with internal rails, ribs or the like, arranged to maintain a helical compression spring in arcuate form lengthwise to correspond with the contours of the magazine, and also to constitute guide rails upon which the cartridges can roll towards the breech as the spring expands during the operation of the firearm. And we've also got what's called an omnibus claim, which is pointless, but you can see this is reproduced in here, so that the helical spring is constrained to follow the curve of the magazine, and then everything can roll on it. Cartridges and the follower. So if we zoom in on the follower now, this is a really quite heavily engineered bit of kit here, and these rollers, they roll, and they roll on the inside there. So these roll on that. This gives CAC somewhere to go. Rollers reduce friction. Everything can roll. It's really very clever. Now, in terms of the rollers, what's interesting here is that this was done earlier, and they were still using a zigzag Sten type spring. And just as a little aside, the earlier Patchett submachine guns, before they'd invented this magazine, they were set up for Sten magazines. So here we have a curved magazine already, but we've got a sort of more elaborate pressed steel mount for the follower, for the rollers, and then we have the rollers. And this is claimed as follows: a spring-impelled platform for use with cartridge magazines of automatic firearms, wherein the said magazine is provided internally with rails as set forth, and the platform formed with an elongated skirted body adapted to move under resilient pressure within said magazine body of said platform being provided with lands and rollers adapted to engage the said rails with small surface contact and be mobile thereupon. So I find this is very interesting, but there is actually a third patent, GB 615466, which relates to magazine construction, like this. However, this isn't mentioned on the magazine itself, and it's a marginal question as to whether it's covered. I suspect, given the strict interpretation under British patent law, I suspect that they didn't, but just out of interest, you see these wiggly bits here and the wiggly bits here as part of the construction. Well, they seem to be a second-gen version of this here, and what this does is quite well described in the claim. A curvilinear box magazine for firearms of the kind referred to herein, characterized in that said magazine is fabricated entirely from pressed metal parts united by welding, one or both of the contiguous edges of the side and front or back plates being flanged for engagement with each other, and said flanges being notched or serrated to eliminate strain and distortion in the assembled magazine after welding and use thereof. So it's kind of serrated, but it probably, the way it's done here, it probably doesn't fulfill that requirement of eliminating the stress. But there's always a problem when you're welding things like this of the residual stresses created by the heat. And what you can see here, you can see all the spot welds. Each of these little wavy bits has been tacked with a spot welder, which is a very efficient way of production, and it's trying to minimize the distortion. But in the patent, they're clearly going for like much sharper things that go right up to the join, whereas here there's an overlap, and I suspect their patent attorney saying it's probably best not to mark it with that patent because it's probably not covered. Interestingly, there's an anecdote I heard from someone in the know that the Fazakali factory, when they started making their unlicensed knockoff Sterlings that resulted in the lawsuit, they had problems with the tube being distorted after welding because the magazine housing is welded on. It's a line weld, and then it's beautifully ground off. This is excellent work, unlike on Stens. And apparently they had this problem, and they went to ask Sterling, well, we're having a great loss rate on these because the tubes are getting warped during welding. How do you fix it? And Sterling were like, piss off. You're making knockoff copies you're not paying us for, and you expect us to fix it for you. And what they did was what they were doing was that they had a jig, the welding jig, which pre-stressed the tube, so that when the residual stresses resulting from the welding were there, it came out the jig straight, which is very, very clever. So it was bent whichever way it needed to bend to compensate for this. And they weld it in the stress state, relax it, perfectly straight tube, works marvelously. So if we go back and do a little quick comparison with the followers here, I mean, the only contact with the sides of the magazine is the rollers. The spring's guided by the 4 rails, compared to this ruddy great thing, which is in great contact, and any cack that gets in there is going to start causing problems. Any cack that gets in the sides of the magazine is going to start causing excess friction, whereas here, because you've got everything running on rails, there's an awful lot less contact in the first place, and then if cat gets in, it will fall in the gaps until it gets so bad that it gets everywhere. So let's now have a look at the Army magazine, the knockoff one. Maker's mark on this is MTY57. I don't know who MTY is. These ones are marked up magazine 9mm L1A2 on the side. I don't know, but I suspect that the commercial Sterling ones are magazine 9mm L1A1. The main difference that you'll spot is in the construction. So as I mentioned earlier, the Sterling ones are all individual plates pressed up and welded together. The Army one is 2 halves that are then line welded front and back. And yes, this one is mint unused. So let's just pop it apart and see if we have our 2 patents represented inside. And of course, we have the patent on the guiding spring. Yeah. And then we have our rollers, and as I said, this is an unissued new old stock magazine that I happened upon online. So yeah, the other interesting thing is that the casing on the knockoffs, on the Army military knockoffs, is a little bit longer than on the actual Sterling made ones.
There now follows a brief public service announcement. If you're watching this video on YouTube, wouldn't it be great if there was somewhere on the internet regrouping the best gun nerd content in one place, free of demonetizations and insta-bans, and enabling you to watch it either on desktop or on most major platforms including Apple, Android, Roku and Amazon Fire? Well, now there is. Go to weaponsandwar.tv and sign up for $9.99 a month or $99 a year to enjoy and support the work of all these great channels in one convenient package with cross-channel collections, feature weeks and other cool features you won't find elsewhere, and better video quality. There may even be a discount code for the monthly subscription active right now. Check the main page of weaponsandwar.tv to find out. If that's not for you, the traditional options of Patreon and Player are of course still open, links in the description, and we're always grateful for a like, a subscribe and a salty comment to feed the algorithm. Many thanks for your support in whatever form it may be. Now, back at the plot.
So I hope that was at least vaguely interesting. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this kind of nerdy content, please consider joining the app. Please consider supporting us on Patreon or Player, or at least just consider liking, subscribing and leaving a salty comment in the description below. So thank you for your support in whatever form it may be. Bye.